Chapter 58. Xianxia let out a long breath and slowly calmed himself down. Then, he looked down at the magical core in his hand. Although he had only absorbed the energy for a short moment, he could clearly feel that the energy in the rank 1 magical core in his hand had been greatly reduced, and even the size of the magical core seemed to have shrunk. This scene made Xianxia gasp. Although the energy in a rank 1 magical core was not particularly much, it would take at least 3 nights for Xianxia to completely absorb the energy in a rank 1 magical core before advancing to a saint. Just now, he had only absorbed the energy in the magical core for a short breath, but he could clearly feel that the energy in the magical core had been greatly reduced. Xianxia really did not dare to imagine how much energy he had absorbed in that short period of time. Then, Xianxia immediately checked his body again, but what surprised him was that after absorbing such a huge amount of energy, there was no reaction in his dantian at all, and there were no signs of his energy increasing either. It was as if the scene just now was just an illusion that had never happened at all. If it weren't for the fact that he could clearly feel that the energy in the rank 1 magical core in his hand had indeed been greatly reduced, Xianxia would have thought that the scene just now was just an illusion because everything was just too strange. Xianxia frowned and thought hard, but no matter how he thought about it, he could not figure it out. In the end, Xianxia could only put this matter aside and continue to absorb the energy in the magical core to cultivate. However, after experiencing that scene just now, Xianxia was obviously much more cautious this time. He paid full attention to the condition of his body to prevent that unbelievable scene from happening again. Unexpectedly, just as he began to absorb the energy in the magical core, the scene just now happened again. The magical core in Xianxia's hand was emitting a faint light, and the energy inside was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. It surged into Xianxia's body at an unbelievable speed, and then was absorbed into his body through the meridians in his arm and the pores in his body. Xianxia sat cross-legged on the bed, and his body trembled slightly like a stone sculpture. Now, he was finally sure that what had just happened was real, and not an illusion. Just when Xianxia was about to stop absorbing the energy in the magical core, he suddenly gave up on this idea, and then raised all his concentration to the peak, paying close attention to the situation in his body. He wanted to figure out what was going on, and why his speed of absorbing the energy in the magical core had suddenly increased to such a terrifying level. Moreover, when the energy entered his body, it immediately disappeared without a trace, and he did not know where it went. The size of the magical core in Xianxia's hand was rapidly shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the huge amount of energy released from the magical core crazily poured into Xianxia's body through the meridians in his arm and the pores in his body. Being impacted by such a huge amount of energy, Xianxia felt a burst of pain in the meridians in his arm and a small part of his skin. It was different from absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth 2 days ago. The yuan qi of heaven and earth was in a gentle state, so under such a fast absorption speed, Xianxia did not feel any discomfort. However, the magical core was different. The magical core was the essence of a magical beast's condensed energy, and whether it was the intensity or the purity of the energy, it was far from the most primitive yuan qi of heaven and earth that could compare to it. Moreover, the energy in the magical core also contained a kind of wild element, so such a fast absorption of the energy in the magical core brought about some drawbacks to Xianxia's body. Xianxia did not care about this little bit of pain, and concentrated on closely observing the situation in his body. He saw that most of the huge amount of energy he had absorbed from the magical core was flowing towards a certain place in his dantian, and only a very small part of the remaining energy was left for Xianxia to absorb. However, when Xianxia found the place where the energy was going, his face suddenly became very interesting, because that place was actually the place where the 2 purple and green light spots suddenly appeared in his dantian 2 days ago, and the energy was actually all absorbed by these 2 light spots. Xianxia slowly opened his eyes, and looked at the magical core in his hand with a slightly dignified expression. Then, he threw the magical core away, closed his eyes again, and continued to absorb the yuan qi of heaven and earth to continue his cultivation. The yuan qi of heaven and earth continuously gathered towards Xianxia, and the speed of gathering was actually more than 10 times faster than when he usually absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth. However, now, among the yuan qi that Jianshan absorbed, 99% was actually absorbed by the two strange light spots in his dantian, and the yuan qi that he could absorb was only 1% of the total. Inferring from this, Jianshan's current cultivation speed by absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth would be 10 times slower than before. After coming to this conclusion, Jianshan's face suddenly became ugly. His cultivation speed was only 1/10 of the usual, and this situation was definitely not what he wanted to see. What he did not expect was that the purple and green light spots in his dantian, which he did not know how they formed, would actually cause him so much trouble. Then, Jianshan tried to absorb the energy in the magical core to cultivate, and then, the heavy expression on his face gradually relaxed. What made him feel very fortunate was that if he absorbed the energy in the magical core to cultivate, then not only would his cultivation speed not be slower than before, but it would also be 3 times faster than before. However, the only drawback was that the consumption of the magical core was too great, so much so that Jianshan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Jianshan stopped cultivating, looked at the dark night sky outside the window, and sighed helplessly. If the two light spots in his dantian were to compete with him for energy every time he cultivated, then it would be very difficult for him to cultivate in the future. After all, by absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth, Jianshan's cultivation speed was only 1/10 of the usual, and although absorbing the energy in the magical core could increase his cultivation speed by another 3 times, the consumption of the magical core was so great that Jianshan could not bear it. A Class 1 magical core was at least enough for Jianshan to cultivate for 3 nights in the past, but now, a Class 1 magical core could only last for less than the time to drink a cup of tea. Calculating from this, Jianshan would need to spend nearly 50 Class 1 magical cores to cultivate for a night. With such a large consumption, even if Jianshan was rich, it would be difficult to provide him with magical cores for cultivation. Baidu search: an hour is 2 hours, a quarter of an hour is 15 minutes, the time to drink a cup of tea is 10 minutes, and the time to burn an incense is 5 minutes. In the future, the smaller units of time will be calculated like this. Jianshan very quickly calmed down. With his wisdom, such a small setback would not be able to defeat him. Sigh, I'll take it one step at a time. If I don't have magical cores, I'll just hunt magical beasts to obtain them. Moreover, who knows when it will be full and won't continue to compete with me for energy. With this thought in mind, Jianshan directly took out a large number of magical cores from his space belt and continued to cultivate. The night quickly passed, and the next morning, Jianshan ended his cultivation. When he counted the number of monster cores he had consumed last night, he couldn't help but gasp. In just a single night, he had actually used up 56 monster cores of the first step. Jianshan's face revealed a trace of a bitter smile. Although he still had many magical cores in his space belt, at this rate, the magical cores in his hands would not be able to last for more than a few days. Once his magical cores were exhausted, he could only rely on absorbing the energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. Now, Jianshan only hoped that the two light spots in his dantian would reach a state of saturation soon, and not endlessly absorb energy like this. Looks like when will I have to go to the forest to hunt magical beasts to obtain magical cores again? Jianshan muttered in a low voice. After calming himself down, Jianshan directly left the dormitory, and then went to the small forest on the east side of the academy to explain some knowledge about techniques and battle experience to his older brother, Xianxia. When the sun had already risen high in the sky, Jianshan finished explaining to his older brother. Big brother, let's stop here for today. You will have to spend a little more effort on the utilization and transformation of power. As for battle experience, it will slowly increase as you fight, so you don't have to deliberately practice. Jianshan said to his older brother, Xianxia. These days, Jianshan would come here every morning to give his older brother some advice about martial arts. Xianxia nodded and said, I understand, fourth brother. Now, Xianxia did not find it strange at all how Jianshan knew these things. He did not know what kind of living environment Jianshan's environment in Changyang Prefecture, but in his opinion his fourth brother was a true genius. Even if he received some special care in the family, it was only natural. Maybe these things were taught to him by the elders in the family. Moreover, he also knew that his fourth brother was especially fond of reading. When he was in the academy, he would run to the library all day long if he had nothing to do. Maybe he learned these things from the books in the family's library. Big brother, take your time to practice. I will leave first. After saying that, Xianxia walked into the depths of the small forest. On the other hand, Changyang who continued to train. In an indoor martial arts arena of the academy, two youths wearing the academy's uniform were engaged in an intense battle. Both of them were wielding huge swords. One of them was wielding a huge sword that was flashing with a fiery red radiance. Waves of hot aura was being emitted from the sword. This person was none other than Cheng Mingxiang, who was known as a cultivation genius in Kargath Academy. The huge sword in the hands of the young man who was practicing with Cheng Mingxiang was flashing with a blue light. He looked a little older than Cheng Mingxiang, but at this moment his face was dignified and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The two people were fighting very fiercely in the field, but people with discerning eyes could see that the young man with the blue sword was completely suppressed by the young man with the fiery red sword. He did not have the strength to fight back and could only blindly resist. Okay, young master, stop fighting. If you continue, I won't be able to hold on. The young man with the blue sword suddenly said. Hearing this, Cheng Mingxiang suddenly stopped, and then the huge sword disappeared from his hand. He said with a faint smile, Shala, now the time you can hold on is getting shorter and shorter. It seems that you should also work hard. The current you is much weaker than before. Hearing this, the young man with the blue sword couldn't help but bitterly smile and said, Young master, it's not that my strength has become weak, but your strength has grown too fast. I am no longer young master's opponent. Hearing this, Cheng Mingxiang's face suddenly showed a trace of pride. Chapter 59. Hearing this, Cheng Mingxiang's face immediately became serious. He took the letter from the student and began to read it. As he read, Cheng Mingxiang's face gradually became gloomy. His expression became extremely unsightly and his eyes burned with raging flames of anger. Seeing Cheng Mingxiang's expression, the youth who had been training with Cheng Mingxiang carefully asked, Young Master Cheng, what's wrong? Could it be that something has happened in the sect? Cheng Mingxiang tightly clenched his fist and crushed the letter into a ball. At this moment, his face was filled with malevolence and his eyes burned with raging flames of anger and intense resentment. Changyang Shoten. Cheng Mingxiang gnashed his teeth and his fists made cracking sounds. From this, it could be seen how furious he was. Hearing Cheng Mingxiang say Changyang Shoten's name, the youth who had been training with Cheng Mingxiang became more and more puzzled. He asked again, Young Master Cheng, what happened? Cheng Mingxiang took a deep breath and said in a low voice, His Majesty has already betrothed Princess Glan to Changyang Shoten. Moreover, they have already been engaged. Hearing this, the youth's face slightly changed. He knew very well that Cheng Mingxiang had a special liking for Princess Glan. Ever since Cheng Mingxiang had first seen Princess Glan in the Imperial Palace a few years ago, he had already been deeply infatuated by Princess Glan's fairy-like appearance and outstanding talent. From then on, he had been unable to extricate himself. In Cheng Mingxiang's heart, he had already set Princess Glan as his. After all, in the entire kingdom of Jesson, only he, Cheng Mingxiang, was worthy of Princess Glan. Whether it was his family background or his talent, Cheng Mingxiang was not inferior to anyone. This was especially true for the Huayan sect behind him. It was the #1 power in the kingdom of Jesson apart from the imperial family. In the kingdom of Jesson, it was like a colossus with a transcendent status. As the young master of the Huayan sect, his status was incomparably high. Previously, Cheng Mingxiang had asked his father to propose marriage to His Majesty more than once, but at that time, his father had always rejected him with the reason that he should spend his time on cultivation and not delay his bright future for the sake of his children. Although Cheng Mingxiang was dissatisfied with his father's rejection, he didn't say anything. This was because, at that time, Cheng Mingxiang had already decided that Princess Glan was his, and no one would be able to steal her away. After all, in the Jesson kingdom, apart from himself, there was no one who could match up to Princess Glan, so he wasn't anxious at all. However, he had never expected that there would be someone in Kargath Academy who was not the slightest bit weaker than him in terms of cultivation. In fact, Cheng Mingxiang's talent was even higher than his. Not only did Changyang Shoten's appearance completely suppress his reputation as a cultivation genius in Kargath Academy, but he had also snatched away his beloved. How could Cheng Mingxiang accept this? The youth who was sparring with Cheng Mingxiang carefully looked at Cheng Mingxiang and said in a low voice, "Young master, what do you plan to do now?" Cheng Mingxiang's eyes flashed with dense killing intent as he said in a deep voice, "Princess Glan belongs to me. In the kingdom of Jessen, only I, Cheng Mingxiang, am worthy of her." Cheng Mingxiang's voice was filled with anger as he shouted, "Shala, call some people. We will go find Changyang Shoten. This time, I will teach him a good lesson for daring to snatch my woman." "Yes, young master." The youth who was sparring with Cheng Mingxiang immediately ran out and began to contact some people. With the powerful strength behind Cheng Mingxiang, he quickly gathered a group of people in the academy. There were a total of 16 people. They were all children of noble families and all had the strength of saints. However, most of them had their magic cores stolen by Jianshan in the forest. As a result, they couldn't complete their mission at all. Because of this, they naturally resented Jianshan. At this moment, when they heard that Cheng Mingxiang was going to personally teach Jianshan a lesson, they all took the initiative to sign up and were willing to participate in this operation. However, among them, there were two people that Jianshan was familiar with. They were Luo Jian of the Luo family and Ka Diyun of the Cardi family. Cheng Mingxiang looked at the crowd calmly and couldn't help but show a smile on his face. He murmured in a low voice, "Very good. With so many people here, even if Changyang Shoten is crippled, Changyang Prefecture won't dare to say anything. After all, these people all have powerful forces behind them. At that time, even if His Majesty the King wants to intervene in this matter to protect Changyang Shoten, he will have a headache." Although Cheng Mingxiang was confident that he could easily deal with Changyang Shoten by himself, Changyang Shoten's identity had been completely different from the past since His Majesty the King announced the engagement between Changyang Shoten and Princess Glan. Not only did he have Changyang Prefecture behind him, but also the royal family. In the face of these two forces, even if Cheng Mingxiang had a powerful background, he had to consider the consequences. If he simply taught Changyang Shoten a lesson, nothing would happen. However, Cheng Mingxiang didn't want to let Changyang Shoten off so easily. Therefore, he called a few more people with powerful backing to act together. At that time, even if Changyang Shoten was crippled or even killed, there were so many forces behind him. Even if His Majesty the King wanted to investigate, he had to consider the overall situation. In the face of so many forces, Changyang Prefecture didn't even have the courage to speak. "Shala, immediately send someone to find Changyang Shoten's location. Remember, this matter must not be publicized. If the vice principal or principal were to find out, all of our plans would fail completely." Cheng Mingxiang instructed the young man who previously sparred with him. "Yes, young master." After that, Shala directly spent money or relied on her connections to secretly inquire about Changyang Shoten's location in the academy. At the same time, she also sent many trusted people to search the entire Kargath Academy. Kargath Academy was very calm. There wasn't the slightest ripple caused by the actions of Cheng Mingxiang and his group. After 2 hours, the 20 over students that Shala sent to search for Changyang Shoten returned one after another. "Young Master Cheng, we searched the entire Kargath Academy, but we didn't find any trace of Changyang Shoten." The leader in charge of searching for Changyang Shoten reported to Cheng Mingxiang. Hearing this, Cheng Mingxiang frowned and said, "How is that possible? Could it be that Changyang Shoten isn't in the academy right now? I heard that Changyang Shoten especially likes to go to the library. I don't know if you guys went to the library to search." Luo Jian, who was standing at the side, said. Although Luo Jian was stabbed by Jianshan a few days ago, after a few days of recuperation and taking good medicine, his injuries had already recovered. "We also went to the library to search. Changyang Shoten isn't in the library." The person in charge of searching continued. At this time, a slightly fat young man opened his mouth and said, I heard that Changyang Shoten is this year's newcomer king. The newcomer king has the privilege of entering the first 5 floors of the library. Could it be that Changyang Shoten is hiding on the 5th floor of the library? If that's the case, then we can only wait for him to come out. Hearing this young man's words, everyone, including Qing Mingxiang, felt that it was very reasonable. The leader in charge of searching for Changyang Shoten shook his head and said, No, I have already asked the cleaning lady in the library. She said that Changyang Shoten didn't go to the library today. Could it be that Changyang Shoten really isn't in the academy? Cheng Mingxiang frowned slightly. At this time, the leader in charge of searching hesitated slightly and then said, Young Master Cheng, although we didn't find Changyang Shoten, we found Changyang Hu in the small forest on the east side of the academy. Changyang Hu is Changyang Shoten's elder brother. I don't think he doesn't know where Changyang Shoten is. Hearing this, Luo Jian's eyes lit up, but then his face became gloomy. He still remembered the scene that happened that night. The magic core in his hands was snatched away by the 2 Changyang Shoten brothers, Tai Ta, and a few others. He didn't have the guts to take revenge on Tai Ta, but he didn't have much fear in his heart towards the 2 brothers, Changyang Shoten and Changyang Hu. That's right, Changyang Hu must know where Changyang Shoten went. I suggest that we go ask Changyang Hu. Luo Jian said in a low voice, and his eyes flashed with a sharp gaze. Okay, let's go find Changyang Hu first. Luo Jian's suggestion was quickly approved by everyone. Then, in order to not attract the attention of the other students, the dozen of them rushed towards the small forest on the east side of the academy in different groups. When they arrived at the small forest, they saw that Changyang Hu was still practicing martial arts in the forest. As soon as he saw Changyang Hu, Luo Jian's eyes suddenly burned with anger. At this moment, Changyang Hu might be too engrossed in practicing martial arts, but he didn't notice the arrival of Cheng Mingxiang and a dozen others. Cheng Mingxiang and a dozen others quickly arrived in front of Changyang Hu and cooperatively surrounded Changyang Hu in the middle. At this time, Changyang Hu suddenly woke up, and when he reacted, there were more than a dozen students wearing school uniforms around him. Changyang Hu looked around, and when he saw the expressions on the faces of more than a dozen people, his heart suddenly jumped. He already had a bad premonition, especially when he saw Luo Jian's eyes filled with hatred. His face couldn't help but become dignified. What are you doing? Changyang Hu opened his mouth and shouted. Although he was surrounded by more than a dozen people, there wasn't the slightest trace of fear on his face. Luo Jian sneered and said, Changyang Hu, do you still remember what happened in the forest a few days ago? Luo Jian's face suddenly became gloomy, and he stared sharply at Changyang Hu and said sternly, You actually dared to snatch the magic core that I spent 3 days to obtain with great difficulty and caused me to fail the task. I must properly settle this account with you. Changyang Hu coldly snorted and looked at Luo Jian fearlessly and said coldly, Luo Jian, you only have yourself to blame. You can't blame us. If you didn't snatch the magic core in our hands first, then the following things wouldn't have happened. You asked for all of this. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your lack of strength. You were actually defeated by my 4th brother who hasn't become a saint yet. At the end of his words, Changyang Hu looked at Luo Jian with a trace of disdain and ridicule in his eyes. Luo Jian was suddenly speechless by Changyang Hu's last words. For him, the defeat in the forest that night was definitely a shame that could not be washed away in his life. With his strength as an intermediate saint, he was actually defeated by a freshman who was not even a saint, and the magic core that he spent 3 days to obtain was snatched away. This result was absolutely unacceptable to him as the young master of the Luo family. Chapter 60. Luo Jian flew into a rage out of humiliation. A huge cyan sword appeared in his right hand in an instant as he swung it towards Changyang Hu's shoulder. Changyang Hu's reaction was not slow either. His vigilance had already reached its peak when he was surrounded by these people. Just as Luo Jian summoned his saint weapon, a huge yellow axe immediately appeared in his hand. He fearlessly swung it towards Luo Jian's huge sword. Just as the 2 of them were about to fight, the surrounding people very sensibly retreated a few steps to avoid being affected. Bang! Luo Jian's huge sword and Changyang Hu's huge axe collided with a loud sound of metal clashing. The two saint weapons collided in the air and immediately separated. Because of the powerful recoil, both of them could not stop themselves from retreating at the same time. Changyang Hu retreated a full 4 or 5 steps before stabilizing himself, while Luo Jian only retreated a few steps before stabilizing himself. In this exchange, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Changyang Hu was at a disadvantage. Although Luo Jian's wind-attributed saint weapon focused on speed and was relatively weaker in terms of attack, his strength had already reached the level of an intermediate saint. Even if Changyang Hu's earth-attributed saint weapon was slightly stronger in terms of defense, he was still no match for Luo Jian. After all, Changyang Hu had just become a saint. Luo Jian did not plan to let Changyang Hu off so easily. His body flashed with a cyan light as gusts of wind constantly revolved around his body. Luo Jian arrived in front of Changyang Hu at an extremely fast speed. His huge sword left behind a cyan light in the air as he chopped towards Changyang Hu at an extremely fast speed. With his wind-attributed saint force, Luo Jian's speed was much faster than the others. Changyang Hu's expression suddenly changed. Luo Jian's attack was so fast that he did not have any extra time to counterattack. In the end, he could only barely raise the huge axe in his hand to block. Changyang Hu died. However, just as Changyang Hu used the huge axe in his hand to block Luo Jian's huge sword, an angry roar rang out from the side. Ka Diyun slashed towards Changyang Hu with a huge sword in his hand, directly chopping at Changyang Hu's right arm. The intense pain caused Changyang Hu to groan. Ka Diyun had clearly used a lot of strength in this attack, leaving a deep wound on Changyang Hu's arm. Because of the huge injury to his arm, Changyang Hu was unable to maintain the saint weapon in his hand. The huge axe once again turned into a beam of energy and disappeared in his hand. Luo Jian's eyes flashed with a sharp light. He once again swung the huge sword in his hand across Changyang Hu's chest. The sharp tip of the sword easily cut through Changyang Hu's uniform, leaving a deep wound on his chest. Immediately, a torrent of blood flowed out from his body, quickly dyeing the front of his uniform red. The intense pain caused the muscles on Changyang Hu's face to twitch slightly, but he did not let out a single scream. Changyang Hu, you didn't think that you would have such a day, did you? Luo Jian laughed loudly, his face filled with malice. The resentment he had for Changyang Hu naturally would not be so easily resolved. He once again swung the huge sword in his hand, adding another wound to Changyang Hu's body. Changyang Hu's eyes were filled with resentment as he stared at Luo Jian. He angrily said, Luo Jian, you useless thing. If you have the guts, go fight with my fourth brother. Let's see if he won't beat you until you're looking for your teeth on the ground. Hearing this, Luo Jian's face suddenly became gloomy. He immediately took a step forward and directly kicked at Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu's eyes flashed. Just as Luo Jian's foot was about to reach his face, he suddenly stretched out his left hand and firmly grabbed Luo Jian's foot. He then pulled back with all his strength. Luo Jian's body suddenly lost balance and directly fell to the ground. Ha! Changyang Hu angrily shouted. His left hand formed a fist, and all the saint force in his body gathered on his fist. He then fiercely smashed at Luo Jian, who had fallen to the ground. Luo Jian's reaction was not slow. Just as his body fell to the ground, he immediately bounced up from the ground, narrowly dodging Changyang Hu's full-strength punch. Bang! Changyang Hu's fist directly smashed into the ground, creating a deep crater. His fist had already completely sunk into the ground. Changyang Hu, you're courting death. Luo Jian's handsome face was pale with anger. He angrily shouted, and all the saint force of the wind attribute gathered on his fist. He then fiercely punched Changyang Hu's chest as fast as lightning. Pfft. Changyang Hu spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was directly sent flying by Luo Jian's punch. He flew for a distance of 4 or 5 meters before crashing to the ground. Just as Luo Jian wanted to rush up and beat up Changyang Hu, Qing Mingxiang suddenly stopped in front of him and said, Luo Jian, it's enough to teach him a lesson. Our main target is Jianshan, not Changyang Hu. Let's first ask him about Changyang Shoten's whereabouts. Luo Jian slowly nodded and did not say anything. If other people came out to stop him, he would definitely disdain them. However, Luo Jian did not want to offend Cheng Mingxiang. Cheng Mingxiang came in front of Changyang Hu and sneered, "Changyang Hu, where is Changyang Shoten?" Changyang Hu struggled to get up from the ground. His face was now pale, and blood kept flowing from the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, his saint force was of the earth attribute, so his defense was stronger. Otherwise, if it was someone else, they would not have had the strength to get up from the ground. Changyang Hu slowly glanced at the dozen youths and said in a deep voice, "I don't know. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Although Changyang Hu was very confident in Jianxin's strength, he could tell at a glance that the dozen youths were all saints. He did not think that Jianxin could defeat so many people by himself. Cheng Mingxiang's expression changed slightly, and he immediately became gloomy. He said coldly, "Changyang Hu, I'll ask you again. Where is Changyang Shoten?" Changyang Hu sneered, "I said I don't know." Cheng Mingxiang coldly snorted and punched Changyang Hu in the face, knocking Changyang Hu to the ground again. He said coldly, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Changyang Hu's eyes burned with rage. He struggled to get up from the ground again and said angrily, "I won't tell you. Cheng Mingxiang, you better kill me today. Otherwise I, Changyang Hu, swear that I will make you regret it in the future." Cheng Mingxiang's face showed a trace of disdain. "Changyang Hu, what qualifications do you have to say that? Just because of your identity as the young master of Changyang Prefecture? My Huayan sect does not put a mere Changyang Prefecture in our eyes." As soon as he finished speaking, Cheng Mingxiang's eyes flashed with a cold light. His right hand formed a fist, and a fiery red light flickered on his fist. He directly punched Changyang Hu in the head and said angrily, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Changyang Hu's head was broken and bleeding from Cheng Mingxiang's fist. Blood flowed from his forehead and quickly rolled down his resolute face, making him look incomparably fierce. "I'll fight you to the death." Changyang Hu could no longer bear it. A huge cyan axe appeared in his left hand, and he roared as he swung it at Cheng Mingxiang. A huge fiery red sword appeared in Cheng Mingxiang's hand, and he easily blocked Changyang Hu's attack. Not to mention that Changyang Hu was currently seriously injured, and he was using the axe in his left hand that he was not familiar with. Even if he was in his peak condition, he would definitely not be Cheng Mingxiang's opponent. Cheng Mingxiang looked at Changyang Hu in disdain, and said mockingly, "Changyang Hu, I advise you to obediently tell me the whereabouts of Changyang Shoten, and save yourself from physical pain." Changyang Hu gasped for breath. At this moment, he was surprisingly calm. He was very clear in his heart that if he continued to stay here, he would definitely be in danger. He carefully looked at the surrounding terrain, and after making some mental calculations, he immediately put away his saint weapon, turned around, and ran in the direction of the academy's field. This small forest was very remote. Usually, almost no one would pass by here, and what happened here would naturally not be known by the outside world. He believed that once he ran to a place with many people, Cheng Mingxiang and the others would definitely not dare to make a move. Moreover, he had many good friends in the academy. Although Changyang Hu did not expect them to help him fight against Cheng Mingxiang, at least they could still report to the academy's teachers and the vice principal. Seeing that Changyang Hu was actually running in the direction of the academy's field, Cheng Mingxiang's expression changed slightly, and he immediately shouted, "Quickly stop him." The dozen or so youths standing behind him who had not made a move immediately rushed forward and quickly chased after Changyang Hu. Cheng Mingxiang's body also turned into a sharp sword and shot towards Changyang Hu at an extremely fast speed. Changyang Hu was now seriously injured and simply could not outrun the crowd. In a short moment, the people behind him had already closed the distance by a lot. Looking at the rapidly approaching enemies behind him, Changyang Hu understood that they would probably catch up to him before he could run out of the small forest. Thinking of this, Changyang Hu gritted his teeth, and his advancing body suddenly stopped, and then ran in the opposite direction into the depths of the small forest. Changyang Hu's sudden change of direction made everyone behind him feel very surprised, but immediately, a cold smile appeared on everyone's face, and the speed of the chase also slowed down. the group of people behind Changyang who fanned out and chased after him unhurriedly. Beside Cheng Mingxiang, Luo Jian sneered and said, looking at the direction in which Changyang who is running, he is most likely going to find Changyang Shoten. Cheng Mingxiang nodded slightly and said, it makes sense. It seems that Changyang Shoten is really not in the academy. Changyang who was running with all his strength in front. Now, not only was his forehead covered in blood, even his school uniform was dyed red by blood, looking incomparably miserable. He did not know where Jianshan was, but he knew that in the depths of the small forest, there was a hillside that was not high. The hillside's terrain was complex, and the trees were much more lush, very suitable for hiding. In a situation where there was no hope of returning to the academy, Changyang whose only way was to use the complex terrain of the hillside to shake off the group of people behind him. However, Changyang who might have forgotten that in the morning, when Jianshan finished teaching him about skills, he also left in the direction he was going now. Under a waterfall on the hillside, a young man wearing a school uniform was practicing swordsmanship on the grass not far from the pool. The young man's figure was relatively thin, and his long black hair reached his waist. He had a very handsome and resolute face, and a pair of eyes that shone with a sharp light like a sword, making people unable to look directly at him. In the young man's hand was a 4-foot-long, 2 fingers wide silver-white thin long sword. On the sword's surface, there were 2 large words written in flamboyant calligraphy, breeze. The young man stood there quietly, holding the long sword in his hand, the tip of the sword slanted to the ground. His whole body was as motionless as a mountain. At this moment, a gleam of light flashed through the young man's eyes. At this moment, his body began to move without any warning. His body arched as he rapidly moved on the spot. The silver-white sword in his hand had completely turned into a white blur. Countless sword shadows constantly flashed through the white blur, leaving only afterimages in the air. The young man's mysterious footwork allowed him to move back and forth in a fixed area. His movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. He was extremely agile, just like a cunning rabbit. The speed at which he stabbed his sword was unbelievably fast, making it impossible for the naked eye to catch him. Chapter 61. Jianshan quickly moved across the grass. The light wind sword in his hand had already turned into a silver ray of light as he stabbed in all directions. His sword technique was swift and fierce. Following Jianshan's quick movements, the wind brought about by his movements caused some of the leaves on the ground to flutter in the air. They looked like butterflies dancing around Jianshan. At this time, Jianshan's sword technique suddenly changed. Even though his sword technique was still as fast as before, every time he stabbed out, the tip of the sword would tremble at an extremely high frequency. The trembling of the sword tip formed a blurry image that normal people wouldn't be able to see clearly. After a moment, the sword in Jianshan's hand suddenly stopped moving. However, even after such a long period of intense movement, Jianshan didn't seem to be panting at all. His breathing was still as steady as before. At the same time, the moment Jianshan stopped, the surrounding leaves that were fluttering in the air also shattered and turned into powder. Only a small portion of the leaves remained intact. The only difference was that half of the leaves had the word sword carved on it. Although the size of the word was different, it took up the entire leaf. The other half of the leaves had the word sword carved on it, but it was either unclear or incomplete. If other people were to see this scene, they would definitely be shocked to the point that their mouths would be wide open. This scene was simply too shocking. It must be known that in the scene just now, the leaves were fluttering chaotically in the air. Countless leaves were constantly intertwining with one another. Just looking at one of the leaves would cause one to be dazzled. Not to mention using a sharp sword to carve a word on it. Most importantly, the leaves were very thin and easily broken. Using a sharp sword to carve a word on such a thin leaf without leaving a single mark on it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If Jianshan's actions were to be made known to others, then his name would definitely spread across the entire Tianyuan continent in a very short period of time. Looking at the leaves and leaf powder that slowly drifted down from the sky, a smile gradually appeared on Jianshan's face. He muttered to himself, Although the speed of the sword is much slower, my control over the sword is so strong that it can't be compared to my previous life. It's as if the sword has completely become my left and right arm. Perhaps this is the advantage of a saint weapon in this world. At this moment, Jianshan's ears twitched slightly. His eyes narrowed and he raised his head to look at the forest in front of him. The silver-white sword in his hand also disappeared. Not long after, the trees where Jianshan was looking at began to tremble slightly. Following that, a person wearing a school uniform and covered in blood staggered out of the forest. When Jianshan's gaze fell on the person's clothes, he already knew that this person was a student of Kargath Academy. However, the blood on the person's clothes made Jianshan feel very puzzled. There were no magical beasts in the surroundings, so how could he be injured? Moreover, Kargath Academy had a clear rule that students could spar with each other, but it was forbidden to fight to the death. However, when Jianshan's gaze fell on the student's face, his face suddenly froze. At this moment, his gaze suddenly froze. He stared straight at the youth whose face was half covered in blood with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. "Big brother!" Jianshan let out a cry of surprise. His voice was filled with astonishment. Following that, his body slightly swayed and in a short instant, he had already crossed the distance of 30 meters and arrived in front of the youth who was covered in blood. Seeing the several hideous and terrifying wounds on the youth's body and the already damaged flesh on his forehead, Jianshan's eyes suddenly became bloodshot. He said in alarm, "Big brother, what happened to you? Who injured you like this?" Following his voice, a strong killing intent was emitted from Jianshan's body. Other than his mother, Jianshan was the second person who truly cared about his big brother Changyang who since he had come to this world. This was because Changyang who completely treated him as a younger brother. Jianshan could still clearly remember that when he had first come to Kargath Academy, his big brother Changyang who had brought him around the academy and introduced him to the rules of the academy as well as other matters. Afterwards, he had even taken great risks and spared no effort to travel 10 kilometers to kill a Class 1 magical beast in the forest. His goal was to give him a Class 1 monster core as a meeting gift. Although Class 1 magical beasts were no threat to Jianshan in the slightest, Changyang who did not have as much experience and powerful battle prowess as him. With only the peak of the 10th layer of Saint Force, it was definitely not easy for him to kill a Class 1 magical beast. Later on, when he had fought with Ka Diyun in the arena, his big brother Changyang who had considered his own lack of strength and took the initiative to fight Ka Diyun in the arena. Jianshan could clearly feel that his big brother Changyang whose concern for him had always been from the bottom of his heart. Now, in Jianshan's heart, Changyang who had already become a close relative. In his previous life, Jianshan had been born in a time of war. When he was still an infant, his parents had been killed by the enemy because of the war. In that life, Jianshan had no relatives and had never experienced the feeling of family. Since the heavens had arranged such a good fate for him in this life, Jianshan treasured it very much. In Jianshan's heart, Changyang who had long occupied an important position second only to his mother, by Yun Tian. Seeing Changyang who beaten to such a state, the anger in Jianshan's heart had already reached an unprecedented height. With his eyesight, he could tell with a single glance that these wounds were caused by someone. Seeing Jianshan suddenly appear in front of him, Changyang whose expression was also stunned. However, his expression suddenly changed and he anxiously said, "Fourth brother, why are you here? Quickly leave this place. They'll catch up soon." Changyang whose face was full of anxiety. He had never thought that he would actually meet Jianshan here. Jianshan's face became extremely gloomy. He said in a deep voice, "Big brother, who beat you up like this?" Anyone could hear the anger in Jianshan's voice that he was trying to suppress. Changyang who pushed Jianshan's body with both hands. His tone was full of anxiety. "Fourth brother, don't ask so much. Quickly leave here and take a detour back to the academy. Otherwise, they will never let you go." Although he knew that Jianshan was very strong and could defeat an intermediate saint, Changyang who would never think that Jianshan alone could face more than a dozen students with the strength of saints. Moreover, one of them was Cheng Mingxiang, who had reached the strength of an advanced saint. Jianxin's body stood there like a stone sculpture. No matter how hard Changyang who tried to push him, he could not move. Jianxin's eyes flashed with extremely strong killing intent. He stared at the woods in front of him with extremely sharp eyes. More than a dozen people in school uniforms appeared where Jianxin was looking at. The ones walking in front were Cheng Mingxiang and Luo Jian, whom Jianxin knew. As soon as they saw Jianxin, Cheng Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and the others showed a trace of joy on their faces. Luo Jian even laughed out loud and said, "Changyang Shoten, we've finally found you. Let's see where you can run to this time." More than a dozen young people quickly stepped forward without any instructions and immediately surrounded Jianxin and Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu's expression drastically changed when he saw that he had been surrounded again. His face immediately became ugly, and he let out a long sigh. He did not say anything. Facing more than a dozen aggressive people, Jianxin did not show the slightest fear on his face. He was still so calm. It seemed that he did not put these people who were not weaker than him in his eyes at all. Jianxin's face was gloomy. His sharp eyes swept across the faces of the more than a dozen young people around him. Anyone who was swept by his eyes felt a faint pain on their faces. Then a chill rose from the bottom of their hearts, as if Jianxin's eyes were completely sharp swords. "Who hurt my big brother?" Jianxin's tone suddenly changed. He shouted, "Stand out." As he spoke, a huge aura emanated from his body. Facing more than a dozen people who were not weaker than him, Jianxin did not show the slightest fear. Instead, his aura was high, and he had a great momentum of not giving up. Jianxin's shout, coupled with the huge aura emanating from his body, frightened the group of people opposite him, including Cheng Mingxiang, to take a step back. After all, Jianxin was a person who had experienced the baptism of slaughter. He was far from being comparable to a group of immature students. Realizing that he had been scared away by Jianxin's shout, Cheng Mingxiang's face turned blue with anger. He, a senior saint, was actually scared away by a freshman who had just become a saint a few days ago. This was simply unacceptable to him. "Changyang Shoten, you're courting death." Cheng Mingxiang flew into a rage out of humiliation. With a loud shout, a huge fiery red sword suddenly appeared in his hand. With a fiery red light, the huge sword pierced toward Jianxin's chest with a burst of hot aura. "Umph!" Looking at the incoming huge sword, Jianxin's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. Immediately, the light wind sword appeared in his right hand and met Cheng Mingxiang's huge sword with lightning speed. Ding! Following a crisp sound, the tips of the two swords, which were completely out of proportion, came into contact with each other in an inconceivable manner. Looking at the two swords touching each other, Cheng Mingxiang's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Whether it was the huge sword in his hand or the long sword in Jianxin's hand, the tip of the sword was very small. At such a fast speed, for the two swords to touch each other steadily was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. And to be able to do this, one had to be incomparably powerful. Moreover, their control over their saint weapons had already reached an extraordinary level. However, for Jianxin to be able to do this with just the strength of a saint, Cheng Mingxiang found it hard to believe. It wasn't that he didn't think that this was a coincidence, but when he saw Jianxin's calm expression, he immediately dispelled that thought. What made Cheng Mingxiang even more surprised was the sword in Jianxin's hand. This sword was just too small. In his eyes, this sword was like an enlarged version of an embroidery needle. It was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide. It was as thin as a piece of paper. Anyone who saw it at first glance would think that this sword was very fragile, as if it could be broken with just a little bit of strength. Cheng Mingxiang dared to swear that this was the first time he had seen such a delicate sword. In fact, he had never even heard of it before. This was because in the Tianyuan continent, everyone used heavy weapons. Condensing one's own saint weapon into a heavy weapon had already become a habit that was deeply planted in everyone's heart. Chapter 62. Cheng Mingxiang's expression became serious. At this moment, facing a new student who had just become a saint a few days ago, this was the first time he had to face him properly. "Cheng Mingxiang, since you've injured my big brother, then don't even think about leaving here unscathed. Jianchen coldly stared at Cheng Mingxiang. Cheng Mingxiang coldly snorted and arrogantly said, "Changyang Shoten, I admit that I've underestimated you. But if you want to keep me here, then you don't have the ability to do so." Jianchen sneered as he looked at Cheng Mingxiang with a trace of disdain. "Whether I have the ability or not, you'll know once you try." As soon as his voice fell, Jianchen's wrist shook slightly. Under his skillful control, the light wind sword broke free from the stalemate with Cheng Mingxiang's greatsword and fiercely slammed into Cheng Mingxiang's greatsword. Clang! With the sound of metal colliding, Cheng Mingxiang's greatsword was directly knocked to the side by the light wind sword. Jianchen's greatsword was only 2 fingers thick, but it contained a frightening amount of power. Cheng Mingxiang's hand that was holding the greatsword was numb from the impact. At the same time, Jianchen's light wind sword left a trail of silver light in the air as it pierced towards Cheng Mingxiang's chest at an extremely fast speed. Cheng Mingxiang was shocked. Jianchen's sword was so fast that he couldn't even see it coming. In his eyes, all he could see was a silver streak of light shooting towards him at an incredible speed. It was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. The tip of the light wind sword pierced through Cheng Mingxiang's uniform and directly into his chest. But under Jianchen's control, it didn't go too deep. When Cheng Mingxiang felt a sharp pain in his chest, he immediately reacted and quickly retreated. As he retreated, Jianchen pulled out the sword that had pierced his chest. Cheng Mingxiang looked at his chest that was stained red with blood. His eyes revealed a trace of fear. At this moment, he couldn't help but think of Jianchen's sword that was so fast that he couldn't dodge it. He swore that since he was a child, this was the fastest sword he had ever seen. At the same time, he was also shocked by Jianchen's strength. He really couldn't understand how a new student who had just become a saint could have such strength. Jianchen didn't plan on letting Cheng Mingxiang go so easily. Using a mysterious footwork, he appeared in front of Cheng Mingxiang like a ghost. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a silver ray of light as it slashed across Cheng Mingxiang's chest. Ah! Cheng Mingxiang let out a miserable scream, only to see that there was already a bloody wound on his chest. The wound spread from the left side of his chest all the way to the right side. The wound was so deep that bones could be seen. Bright red blood surged out, and in the blink of an eye, his school uniform was dyed red. Jianchen's eyes were still filled with anger. He continued to dance with the light wind sword, adding more and more wounds to Cheng Mingxiang's body. Cheng Mingxiang's mouth continued to let out blood-curdling screams. The arrogance on his face had long since disappeared. Facing Jianchen's extremely fast sword technique, he simply couldn't dodge. His body didn't even have the strength to resist. Jianchen's sword technique was simply too fast in his eyes. Every stab seemed to have turned into a ray of light, making it impossible for him to see clearly. Although his saint force was much stronger than Jianchen's, he didn't even have the opportunity to use it. He had completely lost the ability to fight back. The wounds on Cheng Mingxiang's body continued to increase. Each wound looked hideous and terrifying, so deep that the bones could be seen. His originally clean school uniform was not only cut with a few long tears, but the entire set of school uniform was gradually dyed blood red. Moreover, the red range was constantly expanding. Seeing Cheng Mingxiang, who was the strongest amongst them, unable to resist at all, the surrounding students were all dumbstruck. They stared blankly at Cheng Mingxiang, who constantly let out cries of agony. Their faces were filled with disbelief as they stared at Cheng Mingxiang, who had completely overturned everything they knew. Luo Jian was the first to react. Although he was also shocked by Jianchen's strength, when he saw that there were more than 10 of his companions around him who were at least primary saints, he couldn't help but feel emboldened. He immediately roared, "Everyone attack together. No matter how strong he is only one person. Don't tell me that with so many of us here, we are afraid of him." Saying that, a light green greatsword appeared in Luo Jian's hand. With a roar, he took the lead and charged towards Jianchen. Hearing Luo Jian's words, the other dozen or so students came back to their senses. Looking at their companions, the fear in their hearts from Jianchen's display of strength was swept away. Next, huge swords, axes, sabers, spears, and many other weapons appeared in the hands of the dozen or so people. They then aggressively charged towards Xianxia. Xianxia's eyes flashed with a cold light. Facing more than 10 people who were not any weaker than him, he did not retreat. Instead, he took the initiative to charge into their encirclement. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a silver light as it pierced towards the chest of one of the students. Pooh! Xianxia's light wind sword easily pierced through the student's chest. His sword was so fast that it was not something that a group of inexperienced students could block. Ha! Go to hell. At the same time, Xianxia was also surrounded by more than 10 people. More than 10 saint weapons emitted strong energy fluctuations as they attacked Xianxia from all directions. Xianxia's face revealed a trace of a cold smile. The light wind sword in his hand emitted a misty sword aura as it emitted a strong and sharp sword chi. Following that, Xianxia's right arm turned into a blur as he stabbed the light wind sword in all directions with lightning speed. Every time he stabbed out, Xianxia would accurately hit a weapon. In this short period of time, Xianxia had already stabbed out more than 10 times. Ding! 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 A series of clanging sounds of metal colliding rang out in the air. The sounds had already merged into one, as if there was only one sound. When the light wind sword in Xianxia's hand collided with the saint weapons, the faces of those who were attacking Xianxia, including Luo Jian, changed. They all took a few steps back as their hands that were holding onto their weapons began to tremble. Although Xianxia's sword looked very small, the power that was hidden within it was very large. When these 10 people first collided with Xianxia's sword, their arms were already numb from the impact of the collision. Even after blocking the attacks of more than 10 people, Xianxia's expression didn't change at all. His movements didn't stop at all. His feet moved in a mysterious pattern as he shuttled back and forth between the dozen people. The light wind sword in his hand danced at an extremely fast speed, gradually forming a silvery white sword light in front of him. Within the sword light, one could faintly see thousands of sword images floating in the air before disappearing in the blink of an eye. Following Xianxia's ghostly movements, screams of pain could be heard coming from the battlefield. The miserable screams caused those who were not mentally strong to feel a chill run down their spine. The blood-soaked Changyang who stood to one side in a daze. He stared blankly at Xianxia, who constantly changed positions and moved around like a ghost, and at the miserable cries of over a dozen students. At that moment, his mind seemed to have stopped working. He had completely lost the ability to think. At this moment, the 10 students were all lying on the ground, their pale faces filled with pain. Originally, they were wearing a clean and pristine uniform, but now, there were multiple tears. Each tear was dripping with blood, staining the school uniform red. Moreover, as the white light continued to flash on their bodies, the number of wounds on their bodies quickly increased. Initially, it was the upper half of their bodies, but it gradually spread to their thighs. In the end, their entire bodies were covered with terrifying wounds. The blood that was gushing out from their wounds was like a fountain, quickly turning them into people covered in blood. Xianxia quickly circled around the 10 students. In his hands, the light wind sword continuously slashed at the bodies of the 10 students, causing blood and torn clothes to fly into the air. Changyang, whose injuries had greatly affected Xianxia's heart. Towards these 10 students from the same school, Xianxia did not kill them, but he would definitely not let them off so easily. If these 10 people were not from the same school as Xianxia, and if Xianxia was not worried about bringing too much trouble to his family, he would definitely not hesitate to kill them. Senior Changyang Shoten, spare me, I won't dare to do it again. Senior Changyang Shoten, please let us off this time, we won't dare to do it again. Finally, someone could no longer bear the hellish torture and begged for mercy in a pleading tone. With someone taking the lead, the people behind began to beg for mercy one by one. However, there were still a few stubborn people who gritted their teeth and persisted. It was not that they did not think of running away, but whether it was their thighs or their right arms, they were all covered with terrifying wounds. Even the slightest movement would cause them to grit their teeth in pain, not to mention running away. At the very least, They did not have the willpower to endure this kind of heart-wrenching pain. Jianchen gradually stopped. His face was still as cold as before. His face was not red, and he was not panting. However, the light wind sword in his hand was already stained with blood. Jianchen's body was like a tall and straight mountain as he stood in the middle of the field. His pair of eyes seemed to be able to steal a person's soul as they flashed with a cold light. He slowly swept his gaze over the 10 students lying on the ground and said, "I can let you go, but tell me, who was it that injured my big brother?" It was young Master Cheng, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun. Yes, it was the 3 of them who injured Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu was injured by the 3 of them. We did not even make a move. The 10 youths scrambled to be the first to speak, as if they were afraid that Jianchen would be dissatisfied if they were too slow. At this moment, they no longer had any thoughts of taking revenge on Jianchen, and some of them even regretted participating in this mission. Among them, only half of them had their cores stolen by Jianchen in the forest. The other half had no enmity with Jianchen and were only gathered by Cheng Mingxiang. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a cold light as he turned to look at Cheng Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun. His eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 63. Changyang Shoten, what are you doing? If you know what's good for you, you'd better let me go and I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, just wait for my Huayan sect's revenge. Cheng Mingxiang shouted. Seeing Jianchen's current appearance, even an idiot could guess that Jianchen wasn't planning on letting them go so easily. Right now, Cheng Mingxiang only wanted to leave this place as quickly as possible. As for revenge, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Jianchen coldly snorted and said, "Letting you go? It won't be that easy." Hearing these words, Cheng Mingxiang and the other 2's faces suddenly changed. Ka Diyun's face darkened as he said, "Changyang Shoten, we did injure your big brother Changyang Hu, but now that you've injured us, let's cancel each other out." Jianchen slowly walked towards the 3 of them, his light wind sword emitting a sharp sword qi. It looked as if the light wind sword was wrapped in a silvery white aura that flickered in and out of existence. Cancel each other out? How could it be that easy? Today, the 3 of you will leave behind an arm. If you dare to attack us again in the future, I'll take your life. As he spoke, Jianchen had already arrived in front of Ka Diyun. The light wind sword in his hand emitted a beautiful silver light as it swept across Ka Diyun's right shoulder like a bolt of lightning. Ah! Ka Diyun let out a miserable scream. The intense pain caused his face to become completely distorted. His face had already become as white as paper, without a trace of blood. From his right arm, blood spurted out like a fountain. His entire right arm had already been separated from his body and fell to the ground. Jianchen's sword had directly cut off Ka Diyun's right arm. Cheng Mingxiang and Luo Jian's faces suddenly changed. Their facial muscles trembled at the same time as they stared in horror at Ka Diyun, whose right arm had been cut off and who was still screaming miserably. Their faces had become incomparably pale, without a trace of blood. The 10 students who were lying on the ground looked at Jianchen with eyes full of fear. Jianchen's actions were completely out of their expectations. None of them would have thought that Jianchen would be so ruthless as to cut off someone's arm without hesitation. This scene had scared them to the point that their hearts were filled with apprehension. Each and every one of them looked at Jianchen with eyes full of fear. At this moment, they were secretly rejoicing that they had not made a move against Changyang Hu. Otherwise, they would have never doubted that Jianchen would cut off their own arm. After cutting off Cheng Mingxiang's arm, Jianchen acted as if he had just done something insignificant. His expression did not change in the slightest. Whether it was the bloody scene or Ka Diyun's miserable cries of pain, it did not affect his state of mind. Then, Jianchen looked at Luo Jian and slowly walked towards him with the blood-stained light wind sword. Seeing Jianchen approach, Luo Jian's eyes finally revealed a look of fear. Resisting the pain from his wound, he desperately slid his 4 limbs backwards at a snail's pace as he cried out in alarm, "Chang Shoten! What are you doing? Don't come over! Don't come over!" Jianchen leisurely walked in front of Luo Jian and looked at him with a cold gaze. There was no trace of pity in his eyes as he slowly raised the light wind sword in his hand. Seeing Jianshan raise the silver sword in his hand, Luo Jian's expression was completely replaced with fear. He no longer had the arrogance from before and begged, "Chang Shoten, don't. I beg you, don't cut off my arm. If you let me go this time, I, Luo Jian, swear that I will repay you in the future." Jianshan did not move at all. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a silver light, and under Luo Jian's terrified and disbelieving gaze, it cut off his arm with lightning speed. Following a miserable scream, Luo Jian's right arm fell off from his shoulder. Blood gushed out from the wound and sprayed out from the wound. "Changyang Shoten, I will definitely not let you go." Luo Jian's expression became extremely fierce as he roared with a heart-wrenching voice. His eyes were faintly red as he looked at Jianshan with a gaze full of hatred and resentment. Jianshan ignored Luo Jian's roar and continued to walk towards Cheng Mingxiang. Cheng Mingxiang's face had already become incomparably pale. Right now, his heart was filled with regret. If he had known that Jianshan was so strong earlier, he would not have brought only a dozen saints to take revenge on Jianshan. Otherwise, he would not have ended up in such a sorry state. Looking at Jianshan who was walking towards him, Cheng Mingxiang suppressed the fear in his heart and forced himself to calm down. "Changyang Shoten, if you don't want your family too." Just when Cheng Mingxiang reached there, Jianshan's face changed slightly. A vicious light flashed through his eyes, and with a sway of his body, he arrived before Cheng Mingxiang like a ghost. Before Cheng Mingxiang could finish his sentence, Jianshan swung his sword and cut off Cheng Mingxiang's right arm. Cheng Mingxiang let out a muffled groan as his expression became one of pain. Unlike Luo Jian and Ka Diyun, he did not let out a scream as his voice was forcefully suppressed in his throat. However, from the way his face was completely distorted, one could see how much pain he was in. Jianshan coldly looked at the three of them and coldly snorted, "Today, I will temporarily break your wall. If there is a next time, I will directly take your life. Don't think that I am speaking without thinking, I am a man of my word." After saying this, Jianshan's sharp gaze swept over the other dozen students present. Every student who was swept by Jianshan's gaze had their heads lowered in fear. At this moment, after witnessing Jianshan's ruthless methods, they did not dare to have the slightest thought of revenge in their hearts. Jianshan looked at the blood-stained light wind sword in his hand. With a thought, the blood on the light wind sword suddenly began to flow towards the tip of the sword. Finally, all of the blood gathered together and dripped onto the ground. In the blink of an eye, the light wind sword that was originally covered in blood once again became incomparably bright silver. After retrieving the light wind sword, Jianshan walked in front of his elder brother, Changyang Hu. Looking at the bloodied Changyang Hu, Jianshan's cold gaze immediately softened. With a slightly concerned tone, he said, "Elder brother, let's go back." Changyang Hu blankly nodded his head. Right now, the light in his eyes was still sluggish. He still hadn't recovered from the scene that had just happened. Perhaps, the scene that had happened in front of him was too hard for him to accept. Jianshan supported the bloody Changyang Hu as they walked along a secluded path back to the dormitory. Even so, along the way, they still startled quite a few people. Soon, the news of Changyang Hu's injuries began to spread throughout the academy. Not long after Jianshan returned to the dormitory, the bloodied Cheng Mingxiang and a dozen others supported each other as they struggled to walk out from the depths of the forest on the east side of the academy. As soon as they appeared in front of the students, they immediately caused a wave of shock, especially when they saw Cheng Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun's severed arms. Everyone who saw this scene widened their eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. The news of Cheng Mingxiang and a dozen others being injured spread like wildfire throughout the entire Kargath Academy. This matter was immediately reported to the vice principal, Bai En. When vice principal Bai En heard that Cheng Mingxiang and a few others had their arms severed, he took this matter very seriously and immediately rushed to the academy's infirmary. When Bai En arrived at the academy's infirmary, a large group of students who had heard the news had already gathered outside of the infirmary. Vice President Bai En pushed through the crowd of students and directly squeezed into the medical administration department. He saw that in the medical administration department's large bed, there were more than a dozen students covered in blood lying on it. And in the center of the room, 2 middle-aged men and a middle-aged woman were closing their eyes slightly, their hands flat on top of 3 of the students. A milky white light was emitted from their hands, enveloping the 3 students. Enveloped by the milky white light, the terrifying wounds on the bodies of the 3 students were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The healing speed was simply inconceivable. In just a few breaths of time, the wounds on the bodies of the 3 students had completely disappeared. When the wounds on their bodies disappeared, the complexions of the 3 students clearly improved. There was no longer the slightest bit of pain on their faces. Instead, their faces were filled with relief. Even so, from the depths of their eyes, one could still see traces of fear. After treating the 3 students, the 2 men and 1 woman slightly bowed to Bai En, and then threw themselves into the treatment of the remaining students. The vice principal's face was unsightly as he slowly swept his gaze over the remaining students. Especially when his gaze landed on Cheng Mingxiang and the other 2 who had lost their right arms, his face became even more gloomy. In a deep voice, he asked, "What is going on? Who injured you like this? Could it be those outsiders who were passing by? Humph! Don't they know that this area is my Kargath Academy's territory? They actually dared to injure my students in our Kargath Academy's territory? How preposterous!" Baiyan's face was filled with anger. Obviously, he already believed that Qing Mingxiang and the others were injured by some outsiders who were passing by Kargath Academy. "Vice Principal, it was Changyang Shoten, we were all injured by Changyang Shoten," a student said in a weak voice. "Yes, Vice Principal, you must seek justice for us. Not only did Changyang Shoten seriously injure us, he even chopped off the arms of young Master Cheng and the other 2. Vice Principal?" Baiyan was stunned when he heard that, and he felt disbelief in his heart. Among these students, even the weakest was a primary saint. Moreover, there were several intermediate saints and 1 advanced saint. Even if they encountered someone with the strength of a great saint, they would definitely be able to put up a fight. But what he couldn't believe was that so many of them had actually been beaten black and blue by a new student who had just advanced to the saint realm a few days ago. This moved Bai En, and he felt that it was extremely inconceivable. After confirming the authenticity of this matter, Baiyan's face immediately became grave. Finally, with a heavy heart, he directly went to the top of the tower to find the vice principal of the academy. This matter was really too big. It was far from something that Bai En could solve. When Bai En roughly told the vice principal of the matter, the vice principal lost his usual steadiness. With a face full of shock, he stood up from his chair and said, "What? What you said is true. Cheng Mingxiang, Luo Jian and Ka Diyun's arms were all chopped off by Changyang Shoten." "Yes, vice principal. I personally went to see them. Their arms were indeed chopped off," Baiyan said with a serious face. "AI." The vice principal sighed heavily and said, "This is troublesome. Changyang Shoten is too impulsive. I don't care about the Kadi family and the Luo family, but the Huayan sect is not something that Changyang Prefecture can provoke." Chapter 64. After a moment of silence, the principal said, "You're right. Changyang Shoten must be protected. Bai En, you stay in the academy and stabilize this matter for the time being. I need to immediately make a trip to Changyang Prefecture. Otherwise, once the experts of the Huayan sect arrive at the academy, things will be terrible." Afterwards, the dean did not go through the main door. He directly leaped out of the window of the tower. Then, like a large bird, he rose into the sky at an extremely fast speed and flew into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared at the end of the horizon. Watching the principal disappear into the horizon, Bai En sighed and muttered, "This time, Changyang Shoten has really caused too much trouble. If he had only injured a few of them, things wouldn't have ended up like this." But he actually cut off Qing Mingxiang's arm. Although it's not impossible for Qing Mingxiang's arm to recover, his condition is just too harsh. A 7th-class Radiant Saint Master is not someone the Huayan sect can afford. At this moment, the matter of Qing Mingxiang and the other two having their arms cut off by Jianshan had already spread throughout the entire Kargath Academy. Everyone was talking about this matter. As the truth of this matter gradually spread among the students, Jianshan's strength once again shocked all the teachers and students of the Kargath Academy. While the academy was in an uproar over this matter, Jianshan was sitting cross-legged in his room with his head lowered in thought. When he had cut off the arms of Qing Mingxiang and the other two, Jianshan had already realized that he had probably provoked a huge problem. However, he did not feel the slightest bit of regret. Now, Jianshan was quietly thinking about how he should deal with the revenge from the three families. A day passed by very quickly. Evening. Dong dong dong. A series of knocks came from Jianshan's door. Hearing this, Jianshan, who was sitting cross-legged on his bed, slowly opened his eyes. Lowering his head to look at the Class 1 monster cores that had already disappeared without a trace, he inwardly sighed. Afterwards, he looked towards the door and said, "Who is it?" "Xianxia Shoten, I am Vice Principal Baiyan." Baiyan's familiar voice came from outside the door. Jianshan immediately got off his bed and opened the door. He saw the white-robed Vice Principal Baiyan standing straight outside the door. However, Baiyan's complexion was not very good. "Vice Principal, what's the matter?" Jianshan opened his mouth and asked. His tone was extremely calm. Although he had already realized something, it did not cause the slightest fluctuation in his calm. Vice Principal Baiyan looked at Jianshan with a complicated expression on his face. He faintly sighed and said, "Xianxia Shoten, pack your things and immediately come with me to the principal's office." Jianshan faintly replied. Afterwards, he did not say anything and silently returned to the dormitory to pack his things. Jianshan did not have many things to pack. He put some of his own medicine into his space belt and then followed Baiyan to the only tower in the center of the academy. "Hey, look, isn't that Xianxia Shoten?" "That's right. Look at how he's together with the vice principal. He's probably going to be severely punished." When passing by the field, the students who recognized Jianshan immediately focused their attention on him and started discussing. Jianshan turned a deaf ear to the discussions around him. He followed Vice Principal Baiyan and quickly arrived at the tower in the center of the academy. Then he directly went to the top of the tower and entered the principal's office. There were two old men sitting at a round table in the dean's office. One of them was the dean of Kargath Academy, while the other old man was wearing a long green robe. His long black hair was simply tied up and casually fell behind his back. The old man in the green robe looked ordinary, as if he was just an ordinary old man. "Principal, Xianxia Shoten has been brought here." Vice Principal Baiyan slightly bowed and said. Hearing this, the principal's gaze immediately fell on Jianshan. Then he said in a flat tone, "Baiyan, you may leave." Soon Baiyan walked out. Now, only Jianshan, the principal of Kargath Academy, and the old man in the green robe were left in the office. Ever since Jianshan entered, his gaze fell on the old man in the green robe. Jianshan was no stranger to this old man. He was the housekeeper of Changyang Prefecture, Changbo. "Changbo, why are you here?" Jianshan looked at the old man in the green robe and asked. Changbo looked at Jianshan with a complicated gaze. He let out a long sigh and said, "Fourth young master, we all know about your achievements in the academy these days. Both your parents are very happy with your performance. But this time, you were too impulsive." Jianshan naturally understood what Changbo was talking about. He firmly said, "Changbo, I don't regret it. They only have themselves to blame for this. My elder brother didn't offend them at all, but they actually beat him to such a state. If I were given a chance to start over, I would still choose to do the same." Changbo inwardly sighed and said, "Fourth young master, I don't object to your way of doing things. After all, on the Tianyuan continent, strength is everything. Although they are not as strong as you didn't consider the power behind them. If it was just the Kardi clan and the Luo clan, our Changyang prefecture could barely deal with them. However, Qing Mingxiang is the only son of the current sect master of the Huayan sect. In the kingdom of Jessen, the Huayan sect is second only to the imperial family. It is not an existence that our Changyang prefecture can provoke." Xianxia Shoten, the Huayun sect is extremely powerful. Although it is not as powerful as the imperial family, it is still feared by the imperial family. Of the 6 great experts of the kingdom of Jessen, 2 of them are from the Huayun sect, the dean solemnly said. Hearing this, Xianxin's expression also gradually became solemn. At this moment, a soft knock sounded from outside the door. Following which, a respectful voice sounded, "Esteemed Dean, Xiangyang who has been brought here." "Come in," the dean said. The door opened and a teacher walked in with Xiangyang who was wearing a brand new uniform, but there were still clear scars on his face. "Chang Bo." As soon as he entered, Xiangyang who noticed Chang Bo standing beside the dean. He couldn't help but call out in surprise. The teacher didn't enter the dean's office. After sending Xiangyang Hu in, he respectfully bowed to the dean before gently closing the door. Chang Bo's gaze fell on the scars on Xiangyang Hu's face. A trace of anger flashed in his pair of ordinary old eyes, but his expression didn't change. He said in a gentle voice, "Eldest young master, you've suffered." Xiangyang Hu didn't mind at all and shook his head, saying, "It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. However, Chang Bo, why did you come to the academy?" Xiangyang Hu's tone carried a trace of doubt. Chang Bo's expression didn't change. He said in a gentle tone, "Eldest young master, 4th young master, have you packed your things?" Xianxin nodded silently and didn't say anything. "I've packed my things." "Chang Bo, are you here to take us away?" Xiangyang Hu asked with a reluctant expression. Chang Bo nodded, "That's right. I'm here to take you away. It's no longer suitable for you to continue staying in Kargath Academy." Hearing this, Xiangyang Hu's expression darkened. He had already stayed in Kargath Academy for quite some time. He already had a special feeling for the academy. "Xiangyang Hu, Xiangyang Shoten, you 2 can leave first. I have some matters to discuss with Chang Bo," the dean suddenly said. Xianxin and Xiangyang Hu didn't have any objections. They turned around and walked out of the dean's office. Xianxin and Xiangyang Hu didn't have to wait for long. Chang Bo soon came out of the dean's office. But now, the way Chang Bo looked at Xianxin had changed. His eyes were filled with gratification and happiness. Xianxin and Xiangyang Shoten followed Chang Bo down the tower. They sat on Chang Bo's flying magic beast and left Kargath Academy. They flew straight in the direction of Lore City. Sitting on the back of the flying eagle, Xianxin and Xiangyang Hu didn't speak. On the way home, both of them seemed to have a lot on their minds. In Xianxin's mind, the loving face of his mother, Bai Yun Tian, couldn't help but appear. Although Xianxin's state of mind was no longer that of a child, he had never experienced this hard-won motherly love in his previous life. Xianxin's resistance was obviously very low. In Xianxin's mind, he couldn't help but recall his life in Changyang Prefecture. His mother's 100% care and love for him. This made Xianxin's cold heart, which had never experienced motherly love and familial love, feel as if it was placed in a warm ocean. He enjoyed and cherished it very much. Time passed quietly. The Class 4 flying eagle quickly soared through the sky. Its extreme speed brought about gusts of whistling wind that constantly roared and roared in Xianxin's ears. Xianxin's long black hair that reached his waist danced wildly in the whistling wind. Coupled with his handsome and extremely dashing appearance, he looked even more dashing. The flying magic beast flew over various cities and villages in the pitch-black sky. After a few hours of continuous flight and a journey of several thousand kilometers, it finally successfully arrived at Lore City. Under the control of Chang Bo, the flying eagle slowly descended in the backyard of Changyang Prefecture. The miscellaneous people in the backyard had already been evacuated. Those who remained were the loyal guards of Changyang Prefecture. With a sudden gust of wind, the flying eagle slowly descended in the backyard of Changyang Prefecture. As soon as the flying eagle landed, Xianxin, Xiangyang Hu, and Chang Bo jumped off from its back. Over a dozen people had already gathered before the flying eagle. The leader was a middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 40s. He wore black and white robes. He was the master of Changyang Prefecture, as well as Xianxin's father, Changyang Ba. Beside Changyang Ba stood 4 extremely beautiful women. They were Jianxin's mother and 3 other aunts. Between the 4 women stood a girl who seemed to be in her teens. She was Jianxin's second sister, Xianxia Mingyue, whom he had not seen for several months. Beside Xianxia Mingyue was a boy who seemed to be around the same age as Jianxin. They were Jianxin's 3 Qiangyangkus. However, Qiangyangku currently looked at Jianxin with a sliver of schadenfreude. Behind them stood a few middle-aged men and a few old men. They were all people of great authority in Qiangyang Prefecture. However, they were all extremely stern right now. Their gazes towards Jianxin were filled with mixed feelings. There was relief, anticipation, sighing, and helplessness. Changbo walked up to Changyangba and smiled faintly. Patriarch, fortunately, I have not failed you. I have safely brought back the 1st young master and the 4th young master. Changbo's expression was very calm. Changyangba clasped his hands at Changbo and said, Changbo, thank you for your hard work. You're too polite, Patriarch. This is only part of my job, Changbo said indifferently. Chapter 65. Jianxin and Changyang who returned to their mothers. Accompanied by 2 other aunts, they walked to the conference hall of Changyang Prefecture. Ahu, you've suffered in the academy. Look at the scar on your face. On the way, Jianxin's eldest aunt, Linglong, looked at the scar on Changyang whose face with a distressed expression. Her eyes gradually became moist and tears kept rolling in them. Changyang who didn't care at all. He smiled and said, Mother, it's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Fortunately, my 4th brother saved me. Otherwise, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to get out of bed and walk now. Hearing this, Linglong turned to look at Jianxin with a gentle smile on her face. She said, Xiangtan, thank you so much for saving Ahu this time. Jianxin smiled and said, Eldest aunt, what are you talking about? My eldest brother is in trouble. It's my duty to help him. Moreover, this matter was caused by me. My eldest brother was just implicated. As long as you don't blame me, I'm very happy. Linglong smiled and said, Xiangtian, you're becoming more and more sensible. You're much better than us and Ahu. You're flattering me, eldest aunt. Jianxin chuckled. He could clearly feel that Linglong's attitude towards him was much better now. At the very least, she was no longer as indifferent as she had been in the past. Mother, you're right. My 4th brother is very powerful. When he was not a saint, he could hunt 2nd-level demonic beasts alone. When he reached the saint realm, even Qing Mingxiang, who was known as a cultivation genius in our Kargath Academy and had reached the senior saint realm, was no match for him. He was knocked down to the ground in a few moves. At that time, there were more than a dozen students who were above the saint realm besieging him. In the end, they were all easily injured by him. Speaking of this, Changyang who looked particularly excited. He said excitedly, Mother, you didn't see the scene at that time. It was spectacular. My 4th brother beat those people up in the blink of an eye. They were all primary and intermediate saints. They couldn't fight back at all. Hearing this, Jianxin's mother, Bai Yuntian, smiled happily and looked at Jianxin with affection. At this moment, a cold snort sounded from the side. Jianxin's 3rd aunt, Bai Yushuang, coldly said, You're powerful, but you're powerful enough to offend the Huayan sect. You've brought great trouble to our Changyang Prefecture. Jianxin frowned. His 3rd aunt, Bai Yushuang, had always had a prejudice against him since he was very young. Jianxin's mother, Bai Yuntian, was also very dissatisfied with Bai Yushuang's words. However, because it was her son who had caused trouble, she also felt that she was in the wrong. Moreover, his relationship with Bai Yushuang was not good, so she couldn't say anything. Otherwise, it would only escalate this small conflict. Jianxin's 2nd aunt, Yu Fengyan, tried to mediate. Forget it, 3rd sister. What's done is done. It's useless to talk about it now. What we should do now is to properly think about how to deal with this matter. Forget it, 3rd sister. After all, Jianxin caused this trouble in order to save Ahu. This matter can't be completely blamed on him. Linglong also spoke up for Jianxin. Seeing that there were 2 people speaking up for Jianxin, Bai Yushuang lightly snorted and immediately shut her mouth. By Yun Tian lightly sighed. Her gaze was both affectionate and worried as she looked at Jianshan. She said, Xiang, we all know of your achievements in the Kargath Academy. Mother is proud of you. But how could you be so impulsive? You actually chopped off the Huayun sect's current sect master's son's arm. Do you know that not only have you caused great trouble for yourself, but you've also implicated the entire Changyang prefecture? Jianshan revealed a trace of guilt. He said, I'm sorry, mother. I've brought so much trouble to the family. Xiangtian, this matter has already happened. Don't blame yourself. Right now, let's hurry to the conference hall and discuss how to deal with this matter. Second aunt, Yu Fengyan, spoke up. Afterwards, the group gradually quickened their pace and headed to the conference hall. At this moment, in a dazzling palace, the king of the kingdom of Jessen was reading the letter in his hand. His brows were tightly knitted together. After a long while, the king slowly sighed. He said, This Changyang Shoten is far too impulsive. He actually made such a huge mistake and chopped off the right arm of the Huayun sect's sect master's son. This matter has become huge. The Huayun sect is not something that the current Changyang prefecture can contend against. The king slowly placed the letter on the table and shouted, Men, tell the commander of the ironclad army, Bai Dao, to immediately come here. Yes, your majesty. As soon as the king finished speaking, a eunuch immediately ran out. Very soon, a middle-aged man in black armor who seemed to be in his 40s walked in from outside. The middle-aged man's appearance was nothing special. He had a resolute expression and a pair of bright eyes. However, the most eye-catching thing about him was the extremely sinister scar on his forehead. The scar ran across his entire forehead, causing people to shudder in fear. The middle-aged man only stopped when he was 10 steps away from the king. He clasped his hands and said, Your Majesty, may I ask why you've summoned me? The king slowly stood up and took the letter from the desk to the middle-aged man, saying, Take a look. Hearing this, the middle-aged man in black armor took the letter from His Majesty's hand, opened it, and began to read. But after he finished reading, his face became very dignified. Sigh, I never thought that he would actually cause such a huge mess. The black-armored man deeply sighed as a sliver of worry appeared on his face. Young people are always so arrogant. They're just too impulsive. The king sighed, Bai Dao, ever since you joined the ironclad army 20 years ago, you've never returned. Use this opportunity today to go back and take a look. Yes, your majesty. A complicated expression flashed through the young man's eyes. The king suddenly became stern. Bai Dao, you have to convince the people in Changyang prefecture to send Changyang Shoten away as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the people from the Huayun sect find us, we'll be in deep trouble. Only by sending Changyang Shoten away and mediating between us can we temporarily stabilize the conflict between Changyang Prefecture and the Huayun sect. Right now, the surrounding countries have become restless. It looks like they haven't given up on the idea of invading our kingdom of Jessen. At such a critical moment, we can't allow any accidents to happen in our kingdom of Jessen, or the consequences will be unthinkable. Changyang Shoten's talent is supreme and his potential is limitless. His future is limitless. He might be the only hope of our kingdom of Jessen in the past several hundred years, so we have to protect Changyang Shoten. Although we can't guarantee that his future growth will be smooth, we can't let anything happen to him in our kingdom of Jessen. The king's voice was extremely stern. A sliver of pride and joy appeared on the young man's face when he heard that. He forcefully suppressed his excitement and said, Your Majesty, Bai Dao understands. I know what to do. The king slowly nodded. Bai Dao, there's no time to lose. Immediately set off for Changyang Prefecture. With your strength, I believe you'll be able to reach Changyang Prefecture before daybreak. Yes, Your Majesty. In the discussion hall of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Ba sat boldly on the main seat. Below him sat Jianshan, his aunts, and a few core members of Changyang Prefecture. Below Changyang Ba sat caretaker Chang Bo. Changyang Ba's face was filled with worry as he looked at Jianshan with a complicated gaze. He then said, I'm sure everyone knows about what happened to Xiang in the academy. The Huayun sect's current sect master's arm was cut off by Xiang. The Huayun sect will definitely not let this matter rest. Do you have any good methods to deal with this? Everyone fell silent when they heard that. The Huayun sect was the greatest power in the kingdom of Jessan aside from the imperial family. Its strength was something that even the imperial family feared. It was not something that the current Changyang prefecture could handle. Cheng Mingxiang was the only son of the current sect master and had been extremely talented since he was young. Now that his right arm had been cut off by Jianshan, his future would be greatly affected. Without any exaggeration, Jianshan had completely destroyed Cheng Mingxiang. Everyone present knew that the Huayun sect definitely wouldn't let this matter rest. After a moment of silence, an old man in his 60s finally said, "Right now, the best solution is to ask a radiant saint master to regenerate Cheng Mingxiang's severed arm. However, only Class 7 radiant saint masters have the ability to regenerate severed limbs. They are not people that we can ask. Furthermore, Class 7 radiant saint masters are extremely rare on the Tianyuan continent. They do not have a fixed residence, and finding one is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. So, the chances of Cheng Mingxiang's severed arm being regenerated are basically zero." "Sai, that's right. In my opinion, this is the only way to quell the Huayun sect's anger. There's no other way. Even if the imperial family is willing to support us, I don't think the Huayun sect will let this matter rest. However, one thing is for sure, the fourth young master will be hard to protect," a middle-aged man analyzed. The middle-aged men and old men present were all people of great authority in Changyang Prefecture. They had long heard of Jianshan's performance in the academy, and they had already placed the hopes of Changyang Prefecture on Jianshan. As a result, although Jianshan had caused great trouble for Changyang Prefecture, no one blamed him. Everyone was thinking of ways to protect him. In addition, Jianshan was now engaged to Princess Glan of the Kingdom of Jessan. If this marriage went through, Changyang Prefecture's status in the Kingdom of Jessan would rise. "If only the ancestor was here," an old man helplessly sighed. Hearing that, Chang Bo's eyes brightened. He sighed, "That's right. If Master was still here, we wouldn't have to gather here to discuss this matter. Unfortunately, Master has already been gone for several decades without any news. I wonder if he has failed." Hearing that, everyone in the hall fell silent. Jianshan's heart trembled. Although he had never heard of the ancestor or Chang Bo's master, he was able to infer some things from these words. He already knew that the ancestor everyone was talking about and the master Chang Bo was talking about should be the same person. Not only was this person incomparably powerful, not fearing the Huayun sect that had two great experts, but this person was also his ancestor. This question didn't hover in Jianshan's mind for long. Jianshan quickly threw it aside. Looking at the silent people in the hall, Jianshan hesitated for a moment before suddenly saying, "Father, how about we have Chang Bo send me out on a flying magical beast? As long as I'm not in Changyang Prefecture, I believe that even if the Huayun sect really comes, they won't do anything excessive." "No." Just as Jianshan's words fell, Bai Yuntian and Changyang Ba's voices rang out at the same time. Chapter 66. That's right. Xianxia, your mother is right. The outside world isn't as peaceful as the academy. It's filled with slaughter. With your current strength, you don't have the ability to survive. Don't bring this up again. I definitely won't agree to it. Changyang Ba said sincerely. Although his voice was calm, he firmly rejected Jianshan's idea. Jianshan had long since known that it would be very difficult for his family to agree to his idea. However, he didn't give up and continued, "Father, mother, don't worry. Although your child isn't very strong, I have the ability to protect myself. Moreover, I've read many books in the academy and am already familiar with the ways of the Tianyuan continent. Once your child becomes powerful in the Changyang Prefecture, I'll be able to reduce quite a bit of trouble for the Changyang Prefecture." Fourth young master, things aren't as simple as you think. Once the Huayun sect learns that you aren't in the Changyang Prefecture, they'll probably send a large number of people to search for you. With the Huayun sect's influence in the Kingdom of Jessan, it won't be difficult for them to find you. The one who spoke was a white-haired old man. In the hearts of these old men, Xianxia had already become the future hope of the Changyang prefecture. None of them wanted him to die halfway. A 15-year-old saint with strength no weaker than a high-tier saint or even a great saint. Such a heaven-defying genius would definitely be earth-shaking even in the entire Tianyuan continent. Perhaps in the eyes of these old men, Xianxia was no longer a person, but a living treasure. A treasure that radiated with endless light and could bring them endless wealth. As a result, the only thing on the minds of these people in the upper echelon of the Changyang prefecture was how to protect Xianxia and prevent him from being harmed in the slightest so that it wouldn't affect his future. Xianxia revealed a confident smile and said, "There's no need for everyone to worry about that. I've learned a lot about surviving on the continent from the Academy's library. I believe that I'll be able to escape the Huayan sect's pursuit." "No, Xianxia, this is too risky. It's not worth it." Changyang Ba directly rejected Xianxia's suggestion. He continued, "Xianxia, don't worry. Although the Huayan sect is powerful, our Changyang prefecture isn't a pushover. Furthermore, although your grandfather has disappeared for many years, the prestige he left behind in this place still exists. The Huayan sect definitely won't dare to do anything to our Changyang prefecture. If you stay here, we'll definitely do our best to protect you." Xianxia sighed in his heart. From Changyang Ba's firm tone, he could tell that his father would never agree with his idea. "That's right. But Xianxia, this idea of yours is too risky. Even if you can escape the Huayan sect's pursuit, the Tianyuan continent's environment is not as simple as what you've read. It's best if you obediently stay in Changyang prefecture. At the very least, your father and the other uncles will do their best to protect you." Bai Yuntian gently advised Xianxia. Changyang Ba lightly coughed and said, "All right, let's discuss how to deal with the Huayan sect. I estimate that they've already received the news and will quickly rush over to Lore City. Time is of the essence." Changyang Ba's face returned to its previous seriousness. Everyone in the hall fell silent once more, tightly knitting their brows as they pondered. Why don't we ask the royal family for help? After all, the fourth young master is married to the kingdom of Jessen's Princess Glan. In the future, the fourth young master will be the king's son-in-law. Now that his son-in-law is in trouble, I believe that the king will not sit by and do nothing. Someone said. Hearing this, Chang Bo pondered for a moment before saying, "If the royal family is willing to stand by our side and help us with all their strength, we can temporarily suppress this matter. However, this will definitely cause the Huayan sect to be dissatisfied with the royal family. Furthermore, this is an extremely important time. In recent years, the surrounding countries have been secretly mobilizing their troops, seemingly ready to make trouble. I estimate that they are planning to invade our kingdom of Jessen's rich territory. At such a crucial time, I believe that the king will not allow his relationship with the Huayan sect to deteriorate. After all, this is a matter of life and death for the kingdom of Jessen. Without the two heaven saint masters from the Huayan sect, the kingdom of Jessen will not be able to contend against the other countries in terms of peak experts. Although the fourth young master has great potential and is a source of hope for the kingdom of Jessen, no one can say for sure what the fourth young master's future will be like. Furthermore, the fourth young master is still young and needs a very long time to mature. At such a crucial time, the kingdom of Jessen simply does not have that much time to wait. Perhaps by that time, the kingdom of Jessen would have already been destroyed. In the eyes of the king, although geniuses are important, they are far less important than a kingdom. If the kingdom is destroyed, then even if there is an expert supporting him, what can he do? After all, establishing a kingdom is just far too difficult. Thus, I do not believe that the royal family will help us with all their strength. Afterwards, the people in the hall began to think of all sorts of methods, but after an entire night, they were unable to come up with a single one. Very quickly, the night passed under the tense atmosphere of the dozen or so people in the hall. At this moment, the sky was already starting to turn gray. It was already close to dawn. After an entire night of discussion, everyone looked a little tired. At this moment, a guard from Changyang Prefecture ran in from outside and said, "Patriarch, A person who calls himself Bai Dao has arrived. He says he wants to see you. Bai Dao. Changyang murmured with that. A sliver of thought appeared in his eyes before his eyes lit up. He immediately stood up from his chair and hurriedly said, "Invite him in." "Sir." The guard accepted the order and quickly retreated. When Bai Yuntian heard Bai Dao's name, she clearly trembled slightly. A sliver of joy appeared in her eyes, but her expression soon became mixed. A sliver of doubt appeared in Jianchen's eyes when he noticed the change in expression on his mother's face. He had never heard of this person called Bai Dao before, but judging from his mother's reaction, Bai Dao was probably acquainted with her. Jianchen gently nudged Bai Yuntian and asked softly, "Mother, who's this person called Bai Dao?" Bai Yuntian turned her head slightly and looked at Jianchen with a doting gaze. She said, "Xianxia, I'll tell you about this later." But Jianchen nodded and said nothing more. Very soon, a middle-aged man in black robes strode in from outside. His face was resolute, and his sharp eyes flickered with light from time to time. On his forehead was a scar that stretched across his entire forehead, making him seem extremely vicious. Changyang left his seat and made his way to the center of the discussion hall. He clasped his hands and smiled. "Brother Bai Dao, I never thought that I wouldn't see you in 20 years. How have you been?" The middle-aged man called Bai Dao clasped his hands slightly and replied, "I've been all right." Bai Dao paused for a while when he reached there. His gaze paused on Jianchen and his mother for a while before he turned around and said, "Let's get straight to business. I've come under the king's orders this time, and I'm also here to pass on his orders." Changyang immediately became stern when he heard that. He asked, "Brother Bai Dao, does it have something to do with Xianxia?" Bai Dao nodded, "Correct. The king wants you to immediately send Changyang Shoten away from Lore City. That's the only way to avoid a conflict between Changyang Prefecture and the Huayan sect for now." Changyang frowned when he heard that. He clearly did not want to do this. Bai Dao continued, "The matter this time has gotten a little out of hand. Cheng Mingxiang is the only son of the Huayan sect's sect master, and he's a talented citizen. He's the future pillar of the Huayan sect." Changyang Shoten chopped off Cheng Mingxiang's right arm, and Wu Ning destroyed Cheng Mingxiang. As a result, the Huayan sect will not let this matter go so easily. The Huayan sect has 2 Heaven Saint Masters. It's not something the current Changyang Prefecture can contend against. Although the imperial family also has 2 Heaven Saint Masters, these are special times. The neighboring kingdoms have begun to stir again. If I've guessed correctly, the kingdom of Jessen will be baptized by the flames of war again very soon. At this time, the king definitely won't offend the Huayan sect. As a result, we can only send Changyang Shoten away and have the imperial family mediate between us. Only then can we temporarily calm this matter and preserve the strength of the kingdom of Jessen. Is there really no other way? This time, it was Jianchen's second aunt, Yu Fengyan, who spoke. Bai Dao shook his head, his voice filled with certainty. Bai Yuntian's face had already paled. Her voice trembled as she said, "But the people outside are vicious. Xiang is still weak right now, so he'll definitely suffer a lot." Bai Dao deeply glanced at Jianchen, who sat beside Bai Yuntian, and said, "Only through suffering can one rise above others. If one doesn't experience the wind and rain, how can one grow into someone who can stand on their own? Spoiling him like this will not benefit him at all. Instead, it'll harm him." Hearing that, the upper echelons of Changyang Prefecture all nodded. Bai Dao's words made sense. However, Changyang was still hesitant. Jianchen looked around. He knew that his chance had come, so he immediately struck while the iron was hot. He said, "Father, just let me leave. I'm confident that I can deal with anything that happens in the future. At the same time, I really want to go out and explore." "Patriarch, since the 4th young master wants to go out and explore, why don't we let him leave Lore City?" Bai Dao is right. Not only is this the only way to temporarily avoid conflict between our Changyang Prefecture and the Huayan sect, but it'll also be a very good training for the 4th young master. Without experiencing the wind and rain, no matter how talented the 4th young master is, his accomplishments will be limited in the end, Chang Bo said at this moment. Changyangba helplessly sighed when he heard that. He said, "Whatever. Since Changbo agrees with this suggestion, let's let Xiang'er leave Lore City and train outside. I'll send a few loyal guards with Xiang'er to protect his safety." Jianshan could not help but frown when he heard that his father would send guards to protect him. He said, "Father, there's no need to send guards. I want to go out and explore by myself." "Xiang'er, it's far too dangerous for you to go out alone. Calling a few guards can at least guarantee that you won't be bullied," Bai Yuntian said with concern as she held Jianshan's hand tightly. Now that things had developed to this point, there was nothing she could do. She could only accept this reality. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.